Cooler had been flying through space for about a week and still had no clue as to where his crew could be. He and 268 had raided several Frieza Force bases, but their database had no information as to where, or even who, the armored squadron were. That means they were either dealt with just as Cooler was, or they had gone dark. The Iceling knew Dore had knowledge of the galaxy's underworld, and if they had disappeared there, then they'd be nearly impossible to find. Cooler was starting to feel frustrated at his lack of progress, but that's when a large Frieza Force corvette came into view. The Iceling figured this would be the perfect opportunity to blow off some steam, getting up out of his chair and flying out into space in order to greet the ship head on. Without warning, or saying even a single word, Cooler raised his finger and pointed it towards the engines of the ship, intending to cause a chain reaction that destroy it in one fell swoop. However, just as his finger lit up, Naze flew out from the ship, yelling out Cooler's name. What? Was this really his crew? Had they actually survived and kept on fighting the Force? Naze's black armor pointed towards that conclusion, but the Iceling was suspicious. What if someone had survived his raids, and word had gotten back to Frieza? Perhaps they had captured his crew, and were now using them to ambush him. It was even possible that they had brainwashed the crew. Nothing was off the tables when it came to King Cold. Thanks to his prior training, and the new abilities gifted to Cooler by his robotics, he could sense the crew within the freighter. There were around 10 men, all with battle powers less than his. The highest he could sense was around 90k, with the vast majority being less than 10k. There was no way Cold would send people this weak to finish him off. They might not even be able to defeat the Ginyus at this point. Naze, who was running out of breath in space, beckoned Cooler forward, and the Iceling finally chose to trust his former lackey. 268 pulled their ship into the freighter's hangar bay, and when they exited said ship, the armored squadron was there, but their smiles quickly turned into looks of worry. Salza asked what happened to Cooler, but everyone could guess, as they all knew the fate of their former base and friends. The Iceling didn't answer though, as he scanned over his former crew. He was relieved they were alive, but now realized their power would be nowhere near close enough to properly aid him in his quest for revenge. Salza was the strongest member there, but was still only around half as strong as Cooler in his weakened state. Perhaps going to Vampa really would have been a better use of their time. Still though, Cooler put a hand on his second in command and told him he's done well in keeping the rebellion alive.
Okay, meatbags, there's time for a reunion on the way to Vampa. By my calculations, it'll take us a few days to get there. So let's go already.
Excuse me, but who are you? Monsieur Cooler is the only one who can tell us what to do. The Iceling introduced 268 to the crew, saying the bot was there to aid in their rebellion, starting with recruiting powerful fighters. The rebels walked up to their command bridge, everyone still getting used to their chrome-colored leader. His look wasn't the only thing different about him though, as his aura was intense, constantly emitting the feeling of pain and hatred. Even Dore, the most bloodthirsty warrior amongst them, was taken aback by it. He had Naze chart a course to Vampa, while he told the crew about his time in the Big Getty Star, and what happened just prior to it. Everyone found this to be a harrowing tale, one that had them all in favor of killing Frieza, even if Salza had some reservations. He wondered if they could really trust Frigid and this seemingly living metal, but Cooler says they have no other choice. He also then told his crew to be wary of any new recruits they find, as any of them could be spies for Cold or Frieza. In fact, he recommended slaughtering any Force members they came across, leaving no witnesses that could possibly warn their tyrant, as that would only end their mission prematurely. Now, Salza knew his leader had changed, but this Slaughtering innocent soldiers within the force? Now, that was too much. Whatever happened to Cooler couldn't be changed, but that was no excuse to lose sight of their original vision. Salza was about to speak his mind, but Cooler, seemingly knowing every next word, simply stared the lieutenant down. This look, it was enough to paralyze the second in command. Where Cooler's eyes once shone, they were now dull red dots, piercing into the soldier's soul. Salza's captain had become a monster, and this realization made him fall to his knees. Just then, Flake walked into the room and eagerly bowed to Cooler.
Lord Cooler, these brave warriors told me how you saved myself, Muesli, and Granola. I am in your debt and will serve you well. All I ask is you allow me my revenge. Prince Vegeta still lives, and he must pay for the massacre of my people.
Cooler eyed Flake up, seeing what had become of the soldier from so long ago. So his battle power had increased since they last met. Perhaps his need for revenge had increased his strength. Hopefully the same would happen with Cooler himself. Very well, you may have your revenge, provided it doesn't interfere with my ability to defeat Frieza. But do keep in mind, Frieza was the one who ordered death upon your people, not the Saiyans.
With all due respect, sir, the Saiyans always had a choice, just as you did. Instead, they chose to be cowards and serve under that tyrant. Unlike you, sir, you defied that wicked bloodline and willingly paid the price. That is why I choose to serve you, to be your dagger on the battlefield.
This made Cooler smile, if only slightly. Strength was one thing, but such loyalty could never be passed up. This Flake fellow would serve Cooler no matter the task, something he was certain Salza would no longer do, without having to resort to fear tactics, that is. Flake was made the official fourth member of the armored squadron, though Salza nor Naze were all too happy about this. In the years since Cooler's disappearance, the armored squadron and new recruits had two very different ways of doing things. Salza tried to only knock out any force members they came across, doing mostly non-lethal damage, while Dory and Flake were bloodthirsty berserkers in battle. Now, while the lieutenant was often seen as the person in charge, when they liberated worlds, he had trouble reining those two in, oftentimes just praying whoever dared to get in their way lived. He had hoped Cooler would once again keep those two in check, but it would seem the opposite was true. Salza knew taking down Frieza would require some drastic action, but this wasn't what he signed up for. But for the sake of the others, he would stay. The crew made their way to Vampa, while Cooler explored their ship. Several other force members had joined the crew, though they mostly served minor roles, such as maintenance men or medics who operated the healing chamber. There were a few warriors amongst the crew, but their battle powers were hardly notable. Even Dodorio could probably take them out. Other than that, there wasn't much of note, other than Cooler catching up on what's happened during his time away from the galaxy. The eradication of the Saiyans, and countless other races, only served to make Cooler loathe his brother even more. He remembered the decimation of planet Cereal, and the Saiyan Bardock, who showed some honorable qualities. As Flake said, the Saiyans always had a choice, but perhaps Frieza had killed them due to that very reason. If Bardock had already chosen to rebel, then it's likely others were thinking the same way, though there were no reports of such a thing. Maybe those tales of the legendary Super Saiyan finally got to Frieza. Either way, Cooler had much to ponder. A few days later, 268 burst into Cooler's room, saying they had finally arrived at Vampa. The Iceling made his way outside, finding the world quite repugnant, thinking there was no way someone could actually live through this and be a valuable warrior. However, When the scouts returned with 2 Saiyans, Cooler wasn't exactly surprised. Figures a warrior race would be able to live on such an inhospitable world. Paragus immediately bowed before Cooler, introducing himself and Broly. But while the Iceling was investigating these two, Flake stepped between them, aiming his finger right at Paragus' chest.
Lord Cooler, these two are Saiyans. We can't possibly trust them, let alone let them join our rebellion. We aren't threats, not to you, Lord Cooler. All we want is to get off this planet and to get revenge on King Vegeta.
This got Flake's attention, but what none of them noticed was Broly's powers starting to spike up. Seeing his father being threatened in such a manner made the young Saiyan quite angry, and this was just prior to his collar being made, so once Paragus noticed this power spike, he began pleading with the others to step back. However, Cooler found this interesting. Paragus' power wasn't much, but this child? Now, he may be worth something. Flake, pacify this child. The rest of you bring Paragus into the ship. The scout crew listened to their captain, though the armored squadron stayed by his side, especially Dottie, who also wanted to see the strength of this child. Cooler allowed this, crossing his arms as he watched Broly charge a Cerulean. Flake managed to get a shot off on one of Broly's vital points, though it wasn't enough to completely stop the Saiyan, this leading to a bout of fisticuffs between the two. Now, while Broly in the movie had immense amounts of strength, this is around 30 or so years before that movie, and this Broly hasn't had his massive growth spurt yet, so Flake had a pretty easy time smacking the kid around. That was until Broly began growing in battle, as he does. Within only a few minutes he had turned the tables, though he hadn't gone feral just yet. The Cerulean had a power level around 20k by this point, but Broly easily overcame that, something which intrigued the captain. Dottie, having watched this Saiyan overcome his limit so easily, made him excited for a fight, asking Cooler to have a turn against the kid. The Icing allowed this, and the following fight was much more interesting. Dottie had more experience, and while he wasn't the most cunning warrior, his brute strength and battle instincts were second to none. Broly and Dottie were like two sides of the same coin, two brutes going at it, and seemingly having fun brawling each other. However, Broly soon began to lose control, and started to overtake the brute with his unpredictable moves. Cooler watched on, seeing just how formidable such a creature could be. At this rate, he might even overtake Frieza's first form within only a day's worth of battle. But that also proved to be a problem. Such a warrior could take out Frieza, but with no control over his mind nor power, Broly would be more of a liability. The Iceling was about to blast the Saiyan through the heart, but Dottie pulled out some sort of red mushroom and quickly ate it. Seconds later, his pupils disappeared, and his power seemingly skyrocketed. Just like Broly, Dottie had become a berserker, grabbing the Saiyan by the neck and slamming him into the ground before stomping on him over and over. The Saiyan tried to get up and fly away, but a mouth beam from Dottie shot the child back into the ground before the berserker continued his assault. Cooler could sense Broly had reached his limit, at least for now, and since he had no time to breathe or recuperate, he'd likely grow no further. The Iceling could leave this be, let Broly die here, but at this point, this was his only option for ending Frieza. Cooler raised his hand up towards Dottie, using his telekinesis to freeze the brute in place, right before he dealt the finishing blow to Broly. The Berserker attempted to break free, but Cooler used his powers to choke Dottie, slowly putting him to sleep before letting his body drop to the floor. Salsa and Naze were absolutely dumbfounded. This Broly kid was incredible, pushing Dottie to resort to his Berserker mushrooms, and not only that, but he managed to survive against such a foe. This kid was dangerous, but Cooler decided to save him. Sure, maybe Cooler could restrain him, but what if he overcame that as well? They'd be offed without a second thought by such a monster. There was no way they could keep that devil on their ship.
Salza, collect Dottie and Flake. Naze, take Broly to the healing chamber immediately.
Cooler began walking back into the ship, but Salza had to speak up.
Monsieur Couler, we cannot take such a...
Salza suddenly felt his body freeze before he was thrust forward, brought eye to eye with his mechanical master.
You will do as you're told. I am growing tired of this constant dissent from you, my second in command. Are you going to continue having problems, Salza?
The lieutenant shook his head before being let down, him gasping for breath while Naze took Broly into the ship. Cooler eyed the boy. Seeing a child with such wounds did cause him discomfort, but he'd have to get used to it. If Broly were to defeat Frieza someday, he'd have to become a hardened warrior, used to taking such wounds. This was the path Frigid had set them on, and so far it proved to be promising. So Cooler would trust that this was the best option. Inside the ship, Paragus seemed somewhat defeated, but the icing said he should be proud, as Broly would be their salvation. But for now, he'd need plenty of training and rest. 268 loudly agreed, before plugging in a destination on the ship's navigation drive. Paragus visited his son in the healing chambers, and Naze and Salza were nowhere to be seen, while Cooler and 268 looked out towards the stars, watching them pass by as they traveled to some strange planet named Yardrat. But that's where we'll be leaving things off for right now. If you guys enjoyed this, I'd appreciate you using telekinesis on that like button, or maybe even pledging allegiance to the subscribe button. Unfortunately, I don't have much of an outro. Of course, I have to thank you guys to getting us to 496 subs, which I think at the time of recording, we're at 497. So, you know, one step closer. Thank you, whoever was number 497. We're so close. And whatever you guys vote for will likely come out either next week or the week after. Probably the week after, since I am interested in following up the Fusion What If. Anyways, that'll be it for now. You guys have a good day or night wherever you are. Bye-bye.